again. I'm very excited today to share another pasta shape with you. Today we're going to be heading further north to Veneto and going to be covering a filled pasta shape. So this one is called Casunziei, which is a type of beet-filled, half crescent shaped pasta coming from the northern region of Veneto, so close to Cortina in the Alps. And to start today, we're going to be making our egg pasta dough, and then we'll get into the filling later. So for this pasta, I'm going to be making a traditional egg dough for pasta. And the general rule of thumb is about 100 grams of flour and 1 egg per person. Now for a filled pasta, you might want to do a little bit less than that because with the filling, it is a little bit heavier and you tend to, a portion size is a little bit less pasta per person. So here today I have 200 grams of flour and 2 eggs. And this again is going to be for about 3 to 4 people, depending on how hungry you are and if it's your starter or your main. So to just get started right away, I'm going to pour my flour, and this is double odd flour, which is available at most supermarkets, on my work surface, and just make a well in the center of the flour. And you want your well to be big enough to hold both of your eggs. So now I'm just going to pour my eggs into the well, and I've already cracked them for convenience. And starting with a fork, you're going to whisk your eggs together, slowly incorporating flour from the outside of your well. And this will thicken up quite quickly once you get the flour incorporated. And then once you get to that point, it's going to be a matter of switching to either using a pasta scraper to incorporate or to using your hands. So at this point, just keep incorporating that flour. I'm going to switch to my hands. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be making a beet filling later, and the traditional is really a kind of beet, potato, and ricotta combination. Sometimes there's a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano in there as well. I'm going to change it up a little bit today, partly because I don't have some of those ingredients on hand, and partly just because of the flavors that I want. And so I'm going to be doing a beet, ricotta, and goat cheese combination. And I really enjoy the kind of combination of goat cheese and beets. I think that flavor profile is really lovely. Feel free to try different combinations at home. When I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to do, I did try a little bit of blue cheese with beets, and I thought the blue cheese was a little bit overpowering. But you could try some combination like that, or even just do ricotta and Parmesan. So feel free to play around. This filling is very versatile. So there are a lot of options when it comes to kind of what you want to do. Again, it's not going to be the most traditional, but that's okay as long as you like it and you're enjoying it. It's okay to kind of break from tradition every once in a while. I know we tend to have our traditional dishes on the menu, but we also have some fun ones that kind of are playful and break from tradition a little bit. So feel free to meld the two together. So you see now, my pasta dough has come together. It still looks pretty rough. So I'm just going to start kneading, and that is going to help break kind of down the egg more and have it combine with the flour and get a really smooth dough. So you're going to want to keep kneading until you have quite a smooth dough and it isn't sticky anymore to the touch. So as you see, I've kind of put off to the side the extra flour that I didn't need. I am in California, and so it's a little bit drier out here. Actually quite dry where I am. So I'm not going to need as much liquid, so that's probably why I'm not using all the flour that I measured out initially. But that's going to depend, again, your temperature, the size of your eggs, your weather, your humidity, the type of flour you're using. There's a lot of factors that go into the moisture content of a pasta dough. And you'll have to make adjustments as you're kneading and as you're making your dough to make sure you get the right consistency. So now I'm just going to keep kneading for a little bit here. It does take a little bit of effort to get your dough where you want it to be, but I will be sure to show you kind of the consistency you're going for once I get there. So at this point, I have a dough that's really nice and soft and it's come together really nicely. So I'm gonna stop kneading. If you see, it looks really smooth on the surface, and then also when you push in it, it bounces right back. And so that's two good indicators that your dough is ready. So at this point, I'm just gonna clean off my surface. It's a little bit wasteful. We want to get rid of any kind of pieces of flour that incorporated egg but didn't get kneaded into your dough, because those, if you try and knead them in or incorporate them now, they're going to be really tough and they're going to stand out as little pieces that aren't quite the same consistency as your dough. So then you can just leave this on your counter, cover it with a cloth, damp cloth or just a dry cloth, and let it sit for kind of about 30 minutes to an hour, and then that'll help kind of get the dough ready to be rolled out. So I'll come back in that time and I'll show you the rolling out process. Okay, so I'm back and my dough has rested sufficiently. So now I'm gonna go to rolling it out with my pasta machine. You can do this with a rolling pin, but I find it a little bit quicker to use a pasta machine, and it leads to kind of more even thickness in your pasta sheet. So to start, I'm going to cut off kind of medium-sized piece of dough. I can just quickly kind of flatten with my hands. And starting on your thickest setting on your pasta machine, you're gonna just roll it through. Now mine's sticking a little bit, so I'm just gonna coat it with a little bit of flour to help prevent that. And you can also, I like to, on the first setting, just fold it in on itself a couple of times, and that will just kind of be a little final kneading, get everything really consistent. If there are any kind of drier spots from where it's been sitting out exposed. So now I'm just gonna keep adding a little flour so it doesn't stick to the machine, and keep rolling it through. Once it rolls through pretty easily, you can go on to the next setting. I tend to do 1 or 2 times through each, more when you're in the wider settings at the beginning, and then it'll be a little bit easier once you get to the narrower settings. So as you see, we're just going to keep going. So at this point, you see it's starting to get a little bit thinner, but we're still not quite at the thickness that we want for our filled pasta dough. So I'm going to continue to roll it out. That one. And once you get to this thickness, you probably won't need to add any more flour. You don't want to incorporate too much flour at this stage. It's really just to keep it from sticking to the machine, because if it is a little bit too moist, it will roll up into the rollers, and you'll kind of, well, one, make your machine a little bit dirty, but also not lead to very kind of well rolled out dough. So it's important to really make sure it's not sticking. As you see, I'm able to kind of roll it through and it's not sticking at all. So that's through to our thinnest layer. We're just gonna roll it out and place it on this board. And as you see, it's quite thin. You can kind of see through it. It's gonna show that it's gonna be a nice thickness for your filled pasta. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stuff these and show how that's done. And then we can move on to rolling the rest of the dough, because I don't want this sheet to dry out too much, because you do have to seal your ravioli or your casunziei. So yeah, I'm just gonna get back and grab my filling and go through that process really quickly, and then we'll get to stuffing our pasta. So now I have my filling right here, and I've already mixed it and blended it, because you do need to use a food processor. So I wanted to do that ahead of time and let it sit and firm up a little bit before filling my pasta. So here it's very simple. I've taken about 2 medium-sized beets and roasted them in the oven, and then peeled them and put them in a food processor, puree them. You do want a pretty fine texture, so using something like a food processor or a blender works really well. If you don't have those on hand, you can chop them. Just try and chop them as fine as possible, because that's gonna make it easier to fill your pasta. And then once I did that, I mixed those with about a quarter cup of ricotta and about 1/8 of a cup of goat cheese. So not that much. Goat cheese has a pretty strong flavor. You do want to use a fresh goat cheese, not an aged goat cheese, because that's not going to blend as well. And I threw in a little bit of pepper, a tiny bit of salt, and that's my filling. It's quite easy. Again, feel free to adapt it. Add different types of cheese. If you wanted to do a little bit of the potato to be a little more traditional, you can do that as well. So now that I have my filling and my pasta sheet, we're going to get started. This is a kind of half moon shaped pasta, filled pasta. So that means you need to make a circle of dough, kind of put a dollop of filling in the middle and then close it into that half moon. I don't have a ravioli cutter or a cookie cutter that is a circle. So instead I'm kind of searched around the house and found various objects that will allow me to cut a circle. So a lid, an old ice cream container. If you have a mug, that will also work. There's a variety of different options. Kind of look around your kitchen. I'm sure you can find something. If you are really struggling to find something that will cut through the pasta dough, because you do want kind of as narrow an edge as possible to cut through the dough, you can always put down your kind of guide and cut around it with a knife. It'll just take a little bit longer. So I'm going to go through and just take each, and as you see, even I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting that to cut through. Doesn't have to be perfect. So that's my first circle. So I'm just going to cut a few so we can fill a few at once. There we go. That one cut a little bit better. And you do want to work a little bit quickly while you're doing this, because you don't want your pasta dough to dry out too much. If it dries out too much, you will have trouble sealing it. However, there's kind of a neat trick where you just moisten the pasta dough a little bit with water, and then you'll be able to seal it without issue. So that is a workaround if you do find your pasta dough getting a little bit dry. I have a feeling I'm going to have to do that to seal some of these, as they have just been sitting out while I've been talking to you. But that's not a problem. It worked just fine in the end. Then another thing is, if you see all these end pieces, that is kind of around what I've been cutting. So pasta dough like this, you really can't, like with pie dough, you could take this back up and make kind of a crust. But with pasta dough, it's really hard to do that, just because it's going to end up quite tough when you go through that process again. So instead of doing that, you can make what we call maltagliati, which means kind of badly cut in Italian. And as you see, the name is apt because they are indeed badly cut. And you can throw those into a soup, boil them, and kind of mix them with the sauce, do whatever you would like. And that's just a really neat way to kind of use up any spare pieces of pasta dough. Okay, so now we have one of our circles. I'm going to take kind of a nice spoonful of filling and put it in the middle of my dough. Just that real quick. And then I'm just going to close the pasta dough around that. And you really want to make sure that you, one, don't close in any air into the filling. So you want to go kind of from one edge, work around, and then just make sure you have no air left. I feel a slight air pocket right there, which I'm going to try and get out. The reason for that is when you stick this in boiling water and there is a pocket of air, it has a greater likelihood of bursting the ravioli and causing kind of the fillings to kind of float out into the water, which is not what you want. So I keep referring to ravioli because I'm used to making ravioli. Casunziei, as we're making today, are these beet-filled pasta shapes. So that's our first one. You can see he's kind of ready to go there. So I'm going to place him aside and just keep going and keep making little filled half moon shapes. And you do want to have enough filling to kind of get the whole, kind of have a sizable bite to your casunziei. But you do want to be able to have a really firm close around the filling, because again, you don't want it to burst while it's in the boiling water, because then your filling ends up in the water and not on your plate. So I think that one had maybe a little bit too much. I'm gonna try a little bit less and see how this goes. So far my pasta dough is sealing pretty well. with no need of adding kind of any more water. If you do that, just, I'm gonna grab some water. You can just take some water on your finger and go around the edge. Even just half the edge works because that'll help bind the two together. Let's see if that makes it any easier to close this guy. So it does. It does make it a little bit easier to close, so feel free to do that if you are struggling with the closing and sealing your pasta. Okay, so my last three here, so this one's gotten quite dry, so this will need a little bit of that moisture water to help seal it. So as you see, I'm just going around half, and then as soon as you kind of seal that together, it closes much more easily, and you're really able to get that nice seal. And again, I'm just putting them when they're done on this wooden board. They tend not to stick too much to wood, depending on how moisture your dough is. That said, we are working with kind of a fairly wet filling. Most of your fillings probably are going to be, it's the kind of nature of them. So you might want to add a little bit of flour to whatever surface you put your filled pasta on while you're waiting to kind of cook them, just to make sure they don't stick. As I have run into that being an issue in the past, and it's kind of no fun to try and peel up all of your filled pasta that you've just done a lot of work sealing to be able to cook them. So here's my last one. This one feels a little bit more moist, so I don't think we're gonna need any water. So that one looks good. Okay, so I have my first batch made. Now I still have, as you know, kind of this dough to get through. So I'm gonna just go straight ahead with making the rest of it, and circle back when they're all done. So now you see I've kind of made most of mine, and I'm on to the last few to finish. So at this point, again, my dough's still kind of moist enough to close without water. It helps if you, or I found that it helps it if you kind of use the side that's facing down to fill. That'll help keep it so you don't have to add water, because it is a little bit moister than the side that was exposed to air while you were rolling things out and cutting your shapes. So I might be a little bit short, but I think I can squeeze two more out on filling. But if you look, it was about correct. I do have kind of my tagliati to throw into something tomorrow and make another kind of pasta dish on the side. So it's going to be very lightly filled, but that's okay. And my last one, I'm just going to get all of the filling out of this bowl. And we'll have all of our casunziei made. Okay, last one. And for a sauce for these, it can be very simple butter sauce. It goes really well. Filled pasta tends to do well with the butter sauce because it is, you do want to accent that flavor in the filling. And so you don't want a really strong sauce because that's really going to detract from your filling. And that is the main focus of a filled pasta. So I'm going to do a butter sauce tonight. You could do sage butter. You could also do butter with a little bit of poppy seed sprinkled on top. That pairs really nicely with the beet and the goat cheese. And apart from that, buon appetito, top with a little bit of Parmesan Reggiano, and you'll be set. So these are our casunziei filled with beet and goat cheese. I can't wait to eat them tonight. Buon appetito.